So, continuing the story of me entering cosmetology school. So I started going to cosmetology school downtown Inglewood, Maranello Beauty College. It's not there anymore, but regardless, it was cool. Everything was going really good. I had this Jamaican lady who was the instructor for the first half of, at the time it was like 1,600 hours total you had to acquire before you went to state board. So the first half, we were upstairs. Everything was good. So when I graduated to go downstairs to do the second half, you're downstairs and you're actually working on patrons. And also, part of your day is you're studying for state board. The instructor upstairs, she specifically said, make sure you pay attention because when you're downstairs, you have to, know your stuff so that when you go to state board and take your exam, you'll be prepared. So, okay, we go downstairs. Everything's going good so far. There were 2 instructors. One instructor was really nice. But there was this other instructor, and she was okay. This light-skinned, red bone. She had red hair. Her hair was dyed red. And she was unprofessional. Let me just say that. She had, there were like 3 girls in the class that knew her outside of the classroom. So, like, every time we were in class, they were always cutting up. And I'm trying to absorb, the information so I'll be prepared for my state board exam. And I would raise my hand and I would say, can you repeat such and such, because I couldn't hear because these girls was over here clowning and shit. She would always say, we'll go over it again later. And it happened time after time after time after time. So I got frustrated. And I was like, I told them I wanted to transfer. There was another school, Maranello Beauty College, up in the Jewish community, up on Fairfax, up by CBS Studios, up in that area. And they was like, nah, you don't need to transfer, just stay here, whatever, So I continued to stay there, and I stayed there. And the straw that broke the camel's back was one day we were actually working on patrons, and these 2 girls walked in to fight another girl because they were dating the same guy or something. It was something stupid. And so a fight broke out on the floor while we were doing patrons. The girl that was a student in our class, she picked up a rat tail comb and stabbed one of the other girls, and they ended up taking it out in the street, and the police it was crazy. I was like, that was it for me. I was like, I'm getting out of here. So since the teacher wouldn't accept my transfer, I went over her head and I said, I'm going to transfer. I'm going to get what I want. So I went over her head and I contacted the corporate office and I said, I want to transfer. And they asked me why. And I kind of explained, what was going on. And I said what I just previously said to you. So the next day I returned to school, and the lady with the red hair, she was mad at me. And she was like, she threatened me. She said, if you transfer up to the other school, I'm going to go and I'm going to transfer and I'm going to follow you wherever you go and make your life miserable. So I was like, whatever. I ain't paying her no attention. So it was just more and more uncomfortable. So I transferred to a totally different school that wasn't associated with Maranello. And I finished my hours and I graduated. And I went to state board and got my exam. However, the teacher with the red hair, I was labeled because I supposedly told on her. And I wasn't telling on her. I was simply trying to transfer out and go to a different school because it was unprofessional. And so anyways, I've done that in the past. If I want something and you can't get it, you can't give me the result that I want, I'm going to go over your head and get what I want to do. And I've done it in the past and it's no problem. But in California, particularly Los Angeles or whatever, you know, you've got all the gang activity and all the BS where they take it to the street. So all of a sudden, all this stuff starts happening to me, all these different things, and I'm like not knowing why, because I'm like, I'm not doing anything to anyone, I'm not bothering anybody, I'm not creating problems, I'm not doing anything illegal, nothing. And I was just like, I don't know, I just don't understand it. You know, it's just a whole nother story. You know, gang life, initially back in the day, the gangs were formed to protect African American people because of racism against us. But now it's a whole different thing, and I'm not even gonna get into it, but it's a whole different thing now. And so by me trying to transfer to a different school, I got caught up, and she had people harassing me and so on and so on. And I'm still going through it to this day. Just because I wanted to transfer to a different school, and I went over her head, and she took it personal. So personally, I don't feel like I did anything wrong, but you know, I thought about that song that the Dog Pound with Snoop Dogg says, you might get fooled if you come from out of town. And that happened to me. So regardless, that's another traumatic experience that has occurred in my life. And it's something that I'm dealing with, and in addition to my health not being well. You know, my red blood cells are low, my iron is low, my vitamin D is low. I have a whole lot of health issues. You know, physically, my bones hurt. A couple of doctors told me that I have Kaposi sarcoma, which is like a cancer that's associated with HIV/AIDS. And I just get tired easily. I get tired taking showers. I get tired standing up. I have to stand and sit down for a while. Stand, sit down. You know, it's really difficult. And I've been in and out of the hospital several times in the past few years. And so I'm going to take you along the journey if you don't mind, and perhaps somebody can learn from the mistake I made. And so I'm gonna cut this off. I'm done talking tonight, so have a good night.